So this is video 3 of our 4 video series of how to create a repeating pattern from combined scanned areas of material. We've got this area down the bottom that we could do with putting some of these blobs in, and we're going to use brushes for this. So you can make a brush from anything. Unfortunately, I haven't got a pure blob, but I could. Ooh, a little bit of cleaning up that needs to be done there with the. I think I'll use a brush tool set to white just to clean that up. In the previous video, we used the fudge tool. Oh, too far that way. I'm just going to use some little shift selects just to clean that bit up. So I could use this existing blob I've done it again. Okay, click, 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 and then some individual clicks there. I'm going to use a very useful tool called the Magic Wand tool. It's hidden behind the quick selection tool, which is the second tool on the right, to click on this colour here, and whatever tolerance I have is how sensitive that is to colour. If you've got the second button at the top left of your screen active, this is the add to selection option when we've got any selection tools, and that's probably the most useful one. So quite often I have that switched on. I'm going to have that on, and I'm going to increase my tolerance slightly so that it picks up a little bit more of the blue. So a higher value, change that to 30, picks up more, and a lower value, if I deselect that using the select menu deselect command, a lower value, if I put that to 5, will pick up less of the colour. So I'm going to set that back up to 30, clicking that blue area, and it's picked up nearly all of it. I might do another quick click just to see if we can add a tiny bit more in. In fact, I'm going to increase that tolerance to 40. Deselect that, try again. So that's my dot. I'm going to use a copy and paste on that, and then my move tool to move that pasted version, and then I'll just probably use my paintbrush. No, I won't. I'll use my clone stamp tool just to clone the size of that. The missing bits in. Let's do that. Oh, a little bit iffy, but there we go. I'm not unhappy with that. That's a blob sorted. Get out of here. Let's get rid of you. So then it's very easy for me to make a brush from that. If I select that shape, I can go to my edit menu and say define brush preset, and I'm going to call this paint blob. Okay, that. And that's giving me a new brush. And to see that, we're going to go into our window menu and look at brush settings. And here you can see I'm on brush that I just created, which should be right at the bottom of your image, and it should be the brush blob. Oh, it's not. Where have we put that then? Might be right at the top. If I hover over it, no. Okay, well, somewhere in this list of brushes I should have a brush called brush blob. It's probably just showing me the size of it. So to see that better, I'll close that panel down, and I'll just get back to my, not my brush settings panel, but just my standard brushes panel, and it's at the bottom of that. So there's my paint blob, and if I click on it. That should be my paintbrush. I'm just going to, in my brush settings dialog box, drag out the spacing a bit just so you can check. Yep, that's definitely my brush blob. And what's quite nice when we're using these kind of brushes is we can, yes, space them out a bit so that if we held our mouse button down and dragged it would be all gappy. But we can also adjust the shape dynamics. So clicking on the shape dynamics option brings up all these brush settings options. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a size jitter so that when I do click it, it goes slightly bigger and slightly smaller so that it's a bit more randomized. And another thing that I want to randomize a little bit is the angle jitter. So I'm going to change that as well. And you can see in my little preview button at the bottom, that's changing roundness. Oh, we could even do the roundness, the angle as well as the roundness. So I'm happy with how that brush works. That brush is set. I'll just drag that back into my panel. You'll probably be able to just shut yours down. It's quite nice to have your brushes and your brush settings docked near each other. You can get at them easily. So this is the brush that I'm using. It says here when I hover over it at the top left of my panel that I'm using this brush called what do I call it? Paint blob, I think. So now I need to choose the colour I want to paint this with. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool that is actually hidden behind my, ooh, where are you? Oh, see, they've moved my eyedropper tool. My eyedropper tool. Oh, here it is above my brush. So I'm just going to choose that blue. That's now my foreground colour. Go back to my brush tool. I'm using that brush I've just created. And I'm just going to click a few times. Oh, now looks like there's some opacity going wrong. And that's because the brush itself wasn't black when I created it. So we'll think about that when we create our next brush. But you can see it is just giving this kind of brushy texture. Now for me to get a better solid brush, have a look in the layers panel. You can see on layer 4 I've got my brush here. I'm just going to go into my adjustment layer button at the bottom of the layers panel, and I'm just going to change that to black and white, and I'm going to make sure that the blues go very, very black. And you can see how that's doing the whole of my image, and I don't want it to do the whole of the image. I just want it to do layer 4 underneath it. So while I'm on my black and white adjustment layer, I'm going to go into my layers panel button, the burger button, and I'm just going to say create clipping mask, and that just creates a black version of that brush. So I'm going to merge that adjustment layer down onto layer 4 so it's actually really black, and then I'll redefine that brush. So I'm just going to use my rectangular marquee tool for speed up that, select it and use the edit menu, define brush preset, and I'll call this solid paint blob, and I'll OK that and open up my brush settings. I'm going to click on where it says brush tip shape on the left hand side of the brush settings panels and move that spacing out a bit. Then I'm going to go to shape dynamics and I'm going to give it size jitter, an angle jitter, and even a bit of a roundness jitter, just like we did before. I'm done with layer 4 now. I've created my brush, so I'm going to throw it in the bin by dragging it over to the wastebasket icon at the bottom of the layers panel. And I'm finished with my selection as well, so I'm going to go to my select menu and deselect. zooming out, I'm now ready, my blue's already selected, to just click a few blobs. And you'll see, because it's random, they'll just look a little bit randomized. So I could create a few more of those if I wanted to, and each time I click it's a slightly different size, it's a slightly different angle. I only want a couple of those anyway. But you can just rely on the randomization of the brush tool itself, but actually you can also use your square brackets to change the size of the brush as well. So they're my blobs, and you can do exactly the same with the leaves. So just to recap, I'm going to use my Magic Wand tool to select a colour range. That's picked up a leaf nicely. I'm going to copy and paste that and use my Move tool just to move it into a different area so I can work with it. I'm going to use an adjustment layer from my Layers panel to change that to a black and white shape, making the reds really black, so I'm going to slide the red slider down. And it's all a bit scary because you think, oh, it shows the whole image, but using the Layers panel, I'm going to just make that black and white adjustment layer only affect layer 4 with that copied leaf shape on it. I'm going to go in to the bogey button and create a clipping mask. So it's only making that leaf shape black, so I'll get some nice solid leaves later on. And I'm going to just merge that down, my adjustment layer onto layer 4. Marquee. Use my edit menu to define a brush preset. Call that leaf. Click OK. I've done with layer 4, so I'm going to chuck it away. Don't need that selection anymore, so I'm going to deselect it. Command or Control D. And then I'm ready to choose red as my painting colour. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool to choose that red. Grab my brush tool, it should still be on that leaf. And then click a leaf blob over the top. And maybe I want to go to my brushes panel, leaf brush, or to change the size of it, or I could go to my brushes, where are you? My brush settings panel to adjust the tip shape, space that out a bit, and the shape dynamics, make them different size, different angle, and even a different roundness maybe. And then using the bracket keys, I could have small ones. I don't want that one. I want a different shape. I'm just going to keep clicking here for a bit till I get the one I want. Let's make it a tiny bit. Ooh. That'll do. I'll have that one a bit smaller, just there, and maybe another one a bit bigger, just here. I'll zoom out. So that's how I can join those gaps together. I'm going to get rid of all these spare brushes that I didn't need, these spare leaves I should say that I didn't need. I just circle around those and press my delete key and it'll delete it to my background colour, and I'll deselect. So in my layers panel I've got my spare flowers, bing, and I've got my extra brushes and things. In fact, I don't even know whether I need this little spare flower now. I've done such a beautiful job of joining up the orange bit. So I'll use a little layer mask on my layer, on my spare flowers layer, and with my paintbrush tool swap the foreground to black with an X and maybe change back to a regular kind of a brush that I can squish and rotate if I need to. I'll make a new preset of, but I won't. And then I can, let's just choose just a standard round brush. Let's scroll to the top and just get my hard round brush, and then I'm just going to paint out this little spare layer. So finally we have our finished pattern, using brushes to paint in those extra blobs and leaves if they're simple motifs.